You used a word when you start to talk about this that's very, very scary. You talked about pure Boca Raton. And to me, that brings up so many other issues that fortunately don't exist here today. But even the fact that that was part of what the community wanted. Now, you have the end of that bomb story. It was a hoax. You were invited in by the pastor. That actually is a good ending. However, just last week, right here in Boca Raton, at the Chabad of East Boca, somebody broke in, picked up this big cement block with Rabbi New's name on it, and broke the glass of the Chabad. The Chabad is also planning, hopefully, to build a synagogue on Palmetto Parkway. Sun Central did a story on it, and they've been receiving threats. We don't want you here. You know, leave. This happened this week. This is still going on here in Boca Raton. So how do you react to that?
Well, anti-Semitism is going to continue to exist wherever people live. It's fear of the stranger, fear of someone who is different, is inbred in people. It's something that we have to, as human beings, learn to overcome. And that means at times overcoming prejudicial views that we have that our way is the only way, whatever our way is. Our skin color, our culture, our relationship with the spiritual, with God, is the only way that is acceptable, and which is a problem that can then lead to prejudice, hatred, fear, fear of the stranger. So there are always going to be individuals who are going to seek to undermine and hurt the other, and it just means that we have to work that much harder in the spiritual community to improve the understanding that's available.
So personally, Myra, have you ever experienced anti-Semitism?
When I was a little kid in Minneapolis.
What happened?
There was a lot. I remember being stopped on the way home from school by people who asked, "Are you Jewish?" And my family had always said to me, you know, "Don't say you're Jewish."
Really?
Because they were afraid. Because
Really?
we used to walk back and forth, you know,
Yeah.
to lunch in those days by ourselves.
Yeah.
And it was kind of scary. In Minnesota, there was a lot of that. But I remember once when you had to educate a friend and a sports colleague of one of our sons who had defaced the building, actually. And you
With a
had him come in
swastika?
with swastikas, I think, and I forget what else was on it. It turned out to be a kid that our son played soccer with. And he came in with his parents because Merle asked him to do that rather than let the police punish him. And I guess you can tell the story better.
Well, what's interesting in that story is when he came in with his parents, he came in with a T-shirt that was obscene. It had obscene statements on it, not against Jews, but just was totally inappropriate. I insisted that he come back again, and this time I brought in a young woman who was herself a survivor of the Holocaust, and we together talked to him, and it was a community service. He had to learn to change his attitude, and we were not going to let him just get away with saying, "I'm sorry." His prejudice went deeper than that, and we're going to work at letting him know that respect for the Jew is respect for other human beings, or respect for any human being, requires a change in attitude, and that we're not going to tolerate this attitude. I wouldn't tolerate it in my own family, my own children. I'm not going to tolerate it in my son's friends as well.
A good message. You know, we're all people. I kind of find it so hard to relate to anti-Semitism. I grew up in New York City, so everybody was everybody, you know, Jewish or whatever. So I personally never experienced it. But Rabbi Singer, you told me once that also when you were in Minnesota, that a young woman approached you and accused you of being a Christ killer.
Yeah, I grew up in a neighborhood where there were more girls than guys, so we all palled together. And one day we were playing together in this girl's yard, And her mother came out on the porch and looked at me and said, "What is he doing here? Get that Jew out of here." And then the daughter chased me home, calling me a Christ killer. And I would say the hardest part for me was not being called a Christ killer, but being chased home by a girl. That was tougher
Wow.
than anything else.
But anyway, things for you guys. I mean, you came here as the rabbi and the rebbitzin, and with a certain amount of respect. So, and the Jewish community has grown so much. So what do you think the appeal is today of the Jewish community to come to Boca Raton? Because it's grown so much.
I'd like to answer that question, turning it a little bit. So not so much of what is the appeal, but what is the challenge? And the challenge today is apathy. You talked about growing up in New York, where everybody is Jewish and there's a deli on every corner, and Lisa, who needs a Jewish community? Who needs a synagogue? We came to Boca Raton, where the only place you found your Jewish community, Jewish identity, was in the synagogue on a Friday night, and it was in many ways easier to be a rabbi then than it is now. Friday night, everybody came with their kids, and it was fun. It was great. And we were the epicenter for the entire area. Our catchment area went from Palm Beach down to Fort Lauderdale. We had members of our community. Today, why do I need to have a synagogue? Why do I need to have a community? I can be Jewish by being Jewish, whatever that means. I don't need to worry about anti-Semitism because I and my children are. And when I say I mean not only my generation, but my children's generation, so my children and grandchildren are welcome anywhere they wish to be. And anybody's home, they're comfortable. The barriers are not there anymore. So why continue to be Jewish? That's the tougher question.
Well, it's a tough question that everybody would answer differently. Mm-hmm. So that is a whole different subject. But how do you think the Jewish community in Boca Raton, based on the history of them not being welcome here, how do you think they're viewed today in Boca Raton, the Jewish community, in general?
I think the Jewish community in Boca Raton today is viewed with acceptance as it is most any place else in the United States. The only area where there's difficulty in relationship is in the area that we found in our community in North Carolina. We spent our summers in North Carolina, and one of our closest friends, or actually Myra is very, very close with the wife, is in religion, because they homeschool and they're taught that their approach to God is the only true approach. And when she said that to me, I said, well, that means that my way is false. And she couldn't really answer that. Though when she saw some of my videos on the Holocaust, she felt very, very moved and moved to tears. But there is a cultural barrier that the only way we've been able to see it, Myra saw it more than I have, is when we get together as people, as wives, husbands, and parents. Then we can talk.
Interesting. So this person you're talking about obviously is not Jewish.
Right.
So let's talk about some of the programs that you have put together to bring the interfaith houses of worship together, because you have innovated some things that have brought together, as I mentioned, different religions to interact and maybe understand each other better. So tell me about some of those programs.
Well, one of the programs actually is a program that Myra does, is the Giving Tree, which for me, it gives me an opportunity to be Santa Claus on Christmas Eve. But maybe Myra should tell about the Giving Tree, and then I can tell you about the classes of theology, what we're doing that way.
Right, okay. Well, I was actually going to ask you about the Giving Tree later, because you started that, I believe, if I'm after Rabbi Singer retired. Is that true?
No, no.
Oh, this was going
It's
on
been going
forever.
for about 26
Okay.
years now.
So tell me, okay.
But there's
I'm
shared
not-
care, and there are
Yeah.
other interfaith,
Okay.
there are interfaith weekends, and
Well, what? So
and the other
explain.
thing.
Explain.
The Giving Tree is a program where we take care of probably about 2,000 children and senior citizens for Christmas and Hanukkah. It's grown to include about 12 or 13 different agencies that bring people to us. We start in September getting wish lists from people about what they want, so that these children will really get what they want for the holiday, as our children do. And it's developed into a program that goes all year round, finding families in crisis and getting them what they need, from diapers to beds to clothing.
Interfaith?
Interfaith, absolutely. We have a couple of Jewish agencies that we work with, and the majority are open to everybody, as actually is Jewish Family Service as well.
Yeah.
So that we try to meet the needs of people who have kind of fallen through the cracks with the other agencies.
Yeah. Which is wonderful to bring together. It's not just a Jewish issue of people needing things. It is an issue for all. And
Right,
it's
and
great.
the people who help us are from all over the community, Jews,
Yeah.
Christians, whoever
Yeah.
wants to participate.
Great program.
It's sponsored by the temple, but it's out in the community so that many, many people who aren't part of the temple help, as well as the members of the temple.
Very important. Very important. So, and your feeling about bringing together interfaith religions?
Very early on in coming to Boca Raton, I realized that we had the way it was paved for either opening the door or living behind a closed door. And I decided that the mood of the community was ripe and ready for an open door policy. So we began first with the First Presbyterian Church on Camino Real with a pulpit exchange, and all of that expanded to St. Joan of Arc with a pulpit exchange. And it came to the point where after several years of pulpit exchanging, we said, enough talk. We really need to go beyond talk to action. And at that time, there was a member of the community, a former president of the temple, Harry Michelle, and his wife June, June was very active in founding. She founded the May Volan Center, the May Volan Center for Elderly Center.
Oh, okay. I don't know what that center is. Wait.
It's
explain.
It's an interfaith center for it's not non-religious center to help for daycare for the elderly. And so June came with us and helped us with ideas. We were looking for some project that we could work on together. We came up with the concept of shared care, which would be 1 day a week, where we take people who need constant caretaking. We would take the program would take care of the individual who needed the help, freeing the caretaker up to take care of his or her personal needs. And that program is still continuing to this day, and so it's probably it's close to its 30th year. And first began with First Presbyterian Church, then added St. Joan of Arc, and today it continues on. Actually, today it's going on right as we speak at the temple.
You know, there's so many things that you have created that have a lasting effect on the community, the Jewish community, and you mentioned the entire community. But you also did something very different. At Temple Bethel, you have, as part of the synagogue, you have a mausoleum. And you have said you've created a place where people can go from the cradle to the grave in one place. So, and you had to change a law to do that. So tell us about what you were thinking, that you have a mausoleum right on the grounds of Temple Bethel.
Well, that began as a dream probably shortly after I arrived in Boca Raton. I remember sitting in the parking lot, looking across the street at the cemetery, and kind of scratching my head and saying, you know, when I do a funeral, why do we have to travel a half hour to the Jewish cemetery? Why can't we have one on our own grounds? Since we city right contiguous to the city cemetery. And I began to look into that, a possibility. Ran into a little bit of a problem from one individual in the community who was not very friendly to the Jewish community. But by and large, the city fathers, the city leaders, leadership in the community was very cooperative with me. However, the state law required us to, if you're going to have a mausoleum, the law required you to have 15 acres of ground dedicated only to cemetery and mausoleum burial or entombment. We sat on 10 acres, and obviously we didn't meet the requirements. So it just so happened that year I was invited by Suzanne Jacobs, who was a state representative, to Tallahassee to be the minister of the day, which meant you were there to give the opening prayer. And I began to think of, I'm going up to Tallahassee, what can I do while I'm there to help the synagogue and help the community? And at that point, one of our sons, his pilot's license, I went up to the airplane with him and took pictures of the property, how we sit right next to the city cemetery, and I met with the head of the banking commission, which was the head of the cemetery division of the state, and I asked him in early morning hours that I met to give us a special exception to have a mausoleum on our property by our donating a couple acres of our property to the city so that we could build a mausoleum on it. He just looked at me and said, I'm not going to allow it. And take your pictures away. I'm not interested in helping you at all, period. Besides, the law is being sunsetted, which was, when I asked, what does that mean? He said, that means the law is going to be rewritten this term. So thanks to Suzanne Jacobs' help, we met with the head of the legislator that was writing the law, in charge of that, and I was able to have put wording into the law that would allow us and other churches and synagogues, if they could get city zoning, to have a mausoleum on their property. Sitting next to the city cemetery was very easy because for us to get zoning, because where we're located. So we were very fortunate to get the law changed and to get the permission to build a mausoleum. But then began the process of politicking our own congregation to say they wanted to do it, which became an interesting story in itself.